There's a strange kind of frustration that doesn't hit all at once. It builds quietly. You set a real savings goal about 6 months ago, not just a random idea, something you actually meant. Maybe you even opened a separate account for it, told yourself this time it's different. But if you checked that account right now, it would tell a completely different story. Not because you went crazy spending, not because something went wrong. You paid your bills, showed up to work, handled your responsibilities. You did everything you were supposed to do. And still, month after month, that number barely moves. Some months it even goes backwards. And that's where your brain starts negotiating with you. If I just made a little more money, then I could finally save properly. A raise would fix this. A better job would fix this. One more income stream, and everything would click. It sounds logical, but it's not true. My name is Daniel, and I spend way too much time thinking about this exact moment, the gap between people doing everything right and still not getting ahead. Because here's something most people never really process. There are people who suddenly receive $50,000, even $100,000, and within a couple of years, it's gone. Not luxury spending, not stupidity, just the same everyday life running on the same patterns. There was actually a study that followed lottery winners, not the massive jackpot ones, but regular people who received between $50,000 and $150,000. Within 2 years, most of them had saved almost none of it. A lot of them were in worse financial shape than before they won. Same habits, bigger numbers, same outcome. And that's the part people misunderstand. This isn't a story about irresponsibility. It's a story about structure. Because what's actually happening in most people's financial lives isn't a lack of effort. It's that the system they're operating inside quietly pushes money away from savings before they even realize it. Your problem isn't that you don't care about saving. It's that saving has no real structure in your life. It's just this background intention, something you should be better at, but never something that's actually built into how your money moves. And when something has no structure, your brain doesn't treat it seriously. Think about how differently you act when there's a deadline. The same person who delays things for weeks can suddenly lock in and focus when time becomes real. Nothing about them changed. The structure changed. Deadlines create urgency. Open-ended goals create drift. And saving, for most people, lives in that open-ended zone. It's always, I should save more, never, I'm in a defined phase where saving actually comes first. So instead of trying to become a more disciplined person, there's a different way to approach this that completely shifts the outcome. You treat saving like a temporary operating mode. Not something you're supposed to do forever, not a personality trait, just a defined phase where your behavior is slightly different on purpose. And this is where the idea of a 30-month system becomes interesting, not because it sounds nice, but because of how it feels psychologically. 30 months is long enough to matter, but short enough to feel real. You can actually picture your life 30 months from now. It's not some vague, one-day version of you. It's close enough to feel personal. And that changes how you behave. Because now the question isn't how much should I save this month? It becomes what does my life look like for the next 30 months if saving is actually a priority? And that forces decisions at a completely different level. Because now every small choice repeats. That $200 here, $300 there, doesn't feel small anymore when you stretch it across 30 months. It quietly becomes thousands. And the interesting part is, most people don't need to completely change their life to make this work. They just need to notice what's already happening. Because for a lot of people, the money they can't save is already being spent, just in ways that don't feel obvious. Small upgrades, small habits, small defaults. Individually harmless, but repeated over time, they replace saving without you ever consciously deciding that. And what usually breaks people isn't saving itself, it's the beginning. Because the first few months feel slow, almost invisible. The effort doesn't feel rewarded yet, so it feels like it's not working, and that's where most people stop. But inside a 30-month structure, those early months don't get judged like that. They're just the setup phase. And something subtle starts to shift in how you see yourself. You stop being someone who is trying to save, which always feels temporary and fragile, and you become someone who is in a 30-month saving phase. That sounds small, but it changes behavior, because temporary effort is easier to sustain than permanent restriction. People can handle pressure if they know it ends. And this doesn't mean your life becomes restrictive or boring. If anything, it becomes more intentional. You start noticing which expenses actually matter to you and which ones were just habits you never questioned. And when you know this phase isn't forever, it becomes easier to cut the ones that don't matter. Somewhere in the middle of those 30 months, something clicks. The progress that felt invisible at the start finally shows up. The numbers look different. Your buffer feels real. You're not constantly operating on edge anymore. And that's when it starts reinforcing itself. Not because you suddenly became disciplined, but because you can finally see what your behavior has been doing all along. If you've made it this far, subscribe, because this is the kind of thinking that actually changes your financial life long term. Not quick tips, not hacks, just understanding the patterns most people ignore. By the time you reach the later part of the 30 months, something else happens. It stops feeling like a system. It just feels normal. Not because you forced yourself to change, but because you stayed inside a better structure long enough for it to stick. And here's the part that makes this work long term. It doesn't require perfection. You can mess up, you can overspend, you can have off months. But because the time frame is long enough, those mistakes don't destroy the outcome. They just become part of the process. And that removes the pressure that usually causes people to quit. What you end up with isn't just money, it's clarity. You understand your own patterns. You've experienced what happens when time and behavior actually work together. And you realize something most people never give enough time to see. Consistency doesn't feel powerful in the moment, but stretched across time, it quietly changes everything. So instead of asking how to save more next month, a better question might be this. Are you willing to enter a 30-month phase where your decisions are just slightly more intentional than they are right now? Not perfect, not extreme, just consistent enough to finally let time do its job. And I'm curious, if you actually committed to something like this, not forever, just 30 months, what's the first thing in your current lifestyle you'd realistically change without feeling like you're losing something important?